Hello guys, I'm Sota,
I'm Yoshi.
and today we're going to be talking about why our threshold pace is not improving.
We're going to be talking about the main factors that affect your threshold and then practical tips that you can use in your training.
So to start off the video, we're going to talk about the main factors affecting your threshold pace, and the first one is probably the ceiling is too low. So if you improve your ceiling, i.e. your top end speed, your VO2 max, you actually make more room for your threshold to improve. And like Steve Magnus says in a few videos, you can actually pull the threshold up from the top as well, a little bit. Even though you do want to spend most of the time below threshold and pushing it up, you can sometimes do it by raising the roof. And it depends on your scenario and your context and your running background, sporting background as well. So you need to think of it holistically and make sure you're talking with a coach that knows what they're doing so that they're guiding you in the right way. And the second thing after that is actually working on your aerobic base, because the bigger your base, the more you can rely on that aerobic system and not go anaerobic too quickly. Because we all know that even VO2 max, there's a heavy aerobic component because it's the maximum amount of oxygen that you can use at a high intensity. So threshold is clearly the intensity below that. We're still working very aerobically, and if you don't have that base to support it, you're going to cross threshold a lot earlier than the typical person. So it's not only about raising the roof, it's also about building that good foundation at the bottom as well.
Yeah, so the next thing is just not spending enough time at the actual threshold intensity. Some people start their runs just a little bit too slow. Say you're doing a 30-minute tempo. If your heart rate is well below that threshold or you're not hitting threshold until the very end, you're only spending, say, 10 minutes of that 30 minutes at threshold.
Exactly, but that's why we kind of, break it up into intervals a lot of the time now. And you see the Norwegians doing like 25 by 400 with short recovery, that sort of thing. Because we want to keep that lactate up. And you still get to run really quick if you're breaking it up, because it takes a little bit of time for lactate to build up, because lactate responds a bit slower than stuff like heart rate. Yeah.
And then the other issues are like some people go too quick on their threshold. They end up going too fast, going way past their threshold, and then for the next 2 reps or 3 reps of their threshold, they end up just bonking and never actually hitting that.
Yeah, and then you don't spend any time at all at threshold.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
so
almost,
make sure you're staying on pace on your threshold, and then maybe break it up into maybe smaller, more intense sections. Okay, so one of the practical tips you can implement to improve your threshold is to improve your VO2 max ceiling. And this looks like doing 6 to 8 week blocks of VO2 max training, which is going to be short enough that you're not going to be burnt out, but long enough where you're going to drive those adaptations to improve your VO2 max.
Now, a bit of an important nuance here. Obviously, when you do VO2 max blocks, you still want to do threshold during it. But when you come out of a VO2 max block, you would continue threshold but stop the VO2 max, because you can't do VO2 max the whole year round. It's a bit too intense and not everyone can handle it. But threshold is something you do the entire year. You do obviously lose a little bit of that VO2 max gains when you go back to only doing threshold in a week, but you can maintain it a little bit through strides. And also, it's important to know that we've set a very good foundation from doing the speed workouts. So the next time you revisit a speed block or a VO2 block, you're gonna get it back quicker than it took you last time. So you can actually build on top of that and add more layers as you do each VO2 block. It's also important to note that threshold takes a while to improve. You're not gonna see results from week to week. It's gonna be a course of like 8 weeks, months, or even years. You can do it the whole year, as we talked about, because it's a lower sustainable intensity. But yeah, that's why you have to be patient with it and wait for those weeks to compound, and you're gonna get that real benefit from it if you actually are consistent with it. So it does reward the people that are the most patient, and that's why you gotta get out there and get it done each week. But make sure you don't get carried away as well, because if fatigue is catching up to you, then you can actually replace it a little bit with like a tempo run or like a steady easy run, and you're still gonna be teaching your body how to use lactate as a fuel and be a bit more efficient with it and not accumulate it as quick as well. So yeah, you want to prioritize the consistency, and sometimes that means holding back a little bit. And yeah, threshold is a wide range. It's not just riding the fine line all the time. You could be working at LT1 and you're still going to be getting some of the benefits of threshold training, like LT2 training. So you don't need to fixate on always being at that borderline. You can actually hold it back a little bit sometimes. A couple of days ago, I actually did 10Ks at 353 per kilometer. That's super comfortable for me. That's actually probably like my 60 kilometer pace right now, which sounds a bit ridiculous, but it probably is. I've done a 50k road, so I kind of know roughly where that pace sits, but very, very easy intensity, but it's also not slow either. I'm still producing lactate levels above resting values, but it's not an exponential amount. It's not like a considerable amount, but I'm still teaching my body how to use lactate as a fuel and clear it well while running at a decent pace, but not too quick as well. Now, another practical tip is to make sure that you're spending as much time at threshold as possible. And I've made a whole video on continuous tempo versus threshold intervals already, so go check it out if you haven't yet. But essentially that means progressing your workouts accordingly, picking the right things, because continuous tempos, yes, everyone can benefit from it, but at the same time, there's a particular population that would benefit from it more. Again, watch the video to find out what. But threshold intervals is a great way to train. That's probably the most optimal way to actually spend as much time at threshold as possible, due to having those short breaks in between where you let your body recover a little bit and your lactate doesn't lower too much, but you can actually maintain a faster pace throughout the workout because you have those minimal rests in between. This also means that you need to be good at telling the difference between a work to rest ratio of a VO2 workout versus a threshold workout. Threshold workouts, you're aiming more for like a 4-to-1 work to rest ratio, or you want to actually make it even harder than that. So 5-to-1 work to rest ratio, 6-to-1 work to rest ratio. So we're talking in simple terms, stuff like 4 minutes on, 1 minute off to start with, but you might progress later on in the season towards 8 minutes with like a shorter recovery, like 75 seconds off. But again, there's a lot of nuance to it, so I don't want to use exact numbers too much. But yeah, making the workouts progressively harder, there's a lot of parameters for you to consider, like the rest duration, the rep duration, the total volume at threshold, as in the total volume of the workout. And you also have to take into account the conditions on the day, how you slept, your diet, hydration, and all those sorts of factors. Threshold training is complicated, but you need to make sure to understand what threshold feel is as well, to make sure that we're getting the right amount of time at threshold and actually progressing that week to week to get closer to our goals and races as well. And we can't infinitely increase that as well, so obviously you need times where you bring that down and you have to listen to your body and adapt as you go on. So obviously we've been talking about why your threshold pace is not improving. I gave you my thoughts and Yoshi's given his thoughts, but I thought we'd get Anthony involved because he is a runner that has improved so much in the recent couple years, I'd say, doing a lot of threshold volume, so he's definitely an expert on it. And he looks into all the history and the science and stuff, so I reckon he's more knowledgeable than me actually. But yeah, what are your thoughts on why people aren't improving their threshold pace?
It's a good question. I'm going to try and bring up 2 points. The first one is just about patience and sort of the time taken for any adaptations to occur. I think maybe adding a bit more nuance to that. I think in all honesty, like any sort of training system you try to copy from the pros, like a double threshold system, is probably too hard for a lot of people starting out. Like, it is quite intense, you know, running doubles in general. And so in all honesty, I think a lot of us, when we first try this, we're probably overtraining. I think that's probably the more maybe genuine reason why it takes maybe a good 6 months to a year, where you kind of don't really improve, and you could probably do something easier and actually get better gains for that. But I think that year is still really important to build the base. And then I've noticed, this being in my 2nd year of really doubling quite regularly, double workout runs regularly, that the gains have come so much more easily this year, even though I haven't really changed anything. So that's one thing, maybe just like dealing with a bit of too much fatigue for like 6 months to a year. I think the other thing to it is, I think one really succinct way that I've seen one person sort of describe threshold training is it's just about running at an intensity that's sustainable and then doing as much volume of it as possible. So I think a lot of people might not be getting enough of that threshold volume, which once again might just because you're too early in the system. So as an example, I tried to give some volume numbers. If you add up the volume of threshold Ks that I do, I'll probably average around 8 Ks of threshold volume per session. So if you double that on Tuesday, that's 16, double that on Thursday, 32, maybe like a chill park run on a Saturday, that gets me to 37, maybe drop in a couple Ks of threshold to cheat the end of the long run, get you up to like 40, 42 Ks. I'm basically doing a marathon worth of threshold volume every week. And that's like a regular week for me. And remember, this is my training. This is like not at the pro level. So if the pros are dropping in like even more than that amount of volume, so more like, you know, 50 Ks, 60 Ks of threshold volume, and then you compare that to someone who's just trying it out and they're just doing a couple K reps and they're getting tired, the volume difference is immense. So I think in reality, it is maybe going full circle. You just need to run more, you know, but building up to it to get that sheer amount of threshold volume, I think is where the difference appears.
Yeah, for sure. I think I agree with everything you said, so there's not really much to add on from my end, but yeah, in terms of the double threshold, you did touch on a little bit about, you know, not spending enough time at threshold. And I also think it's important to remember that you want to hit a certain amount of threshold, per session, which you actually did say. You know, if you're doing like 4x K and doing double threshold, I don't think that's like how you should do it. You'd rather get it all in one session. So once you get to a certain amount of volume, and there's no perfect number for that. Some people say 110 Ks a week is when you can start considering double threshold, but it could easily be 120, 130 or whatever as well. So there's no perfect number, but yeah, you don't want to be double thresholding when your workouts are super short. So try and get that all in one session so that you're actually spending more time at threshold in that session rather than breaking it up, because it does take a bit for your threshold to rise anyway, because lactate takes longer to rise than something like heart rate, so you're actually not maximizing the amount of time you can spend at threshold by breaking it up into so many sessions in a week. But for your mileage and your experience, I think kind of makes sense. And to be honest, I don't think I'm doing anywhere enough threshold right now, because you're doing 4 threshold sessions a week. Yeah, and here I am doing like barely 1 threshold session a week right now, so I need to actually probably spend more time at threshold. So you're making me think about my training a bit more now. So yeah, thank you so much.
No worries.
If you found this video helpful, I'd appreciate if you guys can donate on my Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you to my recent donors, and other than that, I'll see you on my next video.